Teachers, do you ever feel like your students don't take standardized tests seriously? And by that, I mean, when they take a practice test, do they just rush through it? Or maybe they don't read carefully and they miss important information. My students used to do this all the time, and it drove me crazy. But no worries, because after trying just about everything to get them to pay attention, I found the answer that transformed my class into test taking rock stars. Here are 5 easily taught strategies to get your students on board with passing standardized tests. Before we dive into the strategies, we need to talk about the root of the problem. Students struggle to find the right answer because they go too fast or they don't read carefully. They pick the first answer that sounds right, or they miss information and they choose the wrong answer because of that. Now, what you may not know is these are actually traps that are deliberately laid out for students by the test writers. So, how do you get students to avoid these traps? You harness the power of psychology. Nobody likes to feel tricked, right? When we get tricked, we feel vulnerable and, frankly, stupid. And who likes to feel like that? Not me. Probably not you, and definitely not your students. So, if you want your class to be serious about test prep, show them the traps that the test writers purposely set to trick them, and then teach them how to avoid falling for them. By framing test taking as a battle against the writers, you turn the challenge into a concrete competition. And suddenly your kiddos are motivated to outsmart those test writers. Now you give them the practical strategies. Test writers know that a lot of students won't read all of the answer choices, especially if one of the first answers sounds right. So, choice A often looks right if you don't read the question carefully. Many students fall into this trap. Here's how they avoid it: read all the answer choices all the time, no matter what. To prove to your students that what you're telling them about this trap is true, show them examples of practice questions where the first answer choice seems right at first glance, but is actually wrong. The number 2 trap is what I like to call the bait and switch. Sometimes, when the question asks about a specific paragraph, the test writers will include an answer choice that seems to answer the question correctly, but it's located in a different paragraph. They know that all students don't check to make sure their answer is found in the specified paragraph. Here's how to avoid this trap: you add a step before and after the students choose an answer. So, first, in the question, students circle the paragraph the question is asking about before they choose an answer. Then, after they answer, have the students look to make sure that the information in their answer is actually found in the targeted paragraph. Again, practice this with sample questions so that your students know what to look for and how to avoid this trap. Trap number 3 is the two-step trick, which is absolutely a classic. This is when, in two-step problems, test writers will often include partial answers as one of the first answer choices. That's to distract students from completing both of the required steps. So the answer they get for step 1 will be choice A or B. To teach students to avoid this trap, have them underline the final goal in the question before they answer, and then double check their process after they've answered the question. Let's look at an example of this one. So here is a typical two-part question. So Peter is feeding his cat, Leo, a certain amount of food. And you notice that this amount of food is
fed to Leo every day. However, the question asks, how many total cups of food does Peter feed Leo in a week, not in a day? So that is why this is a two-part question, because students first have to calculate how much food Leo is fed every day. And then secondarily, they have to calculate, uh, take that number and multiply it by 7 to calculate how much food Leo is fed in a week. So let's get started. If we look at this and you get started with part one, you have to calculate how much Leo is fed every day. So you take the 3/10 of a cup of dry, add it to the 9/10 of a cup of wet cat food, you end up with 12/10. Now, if students aren't careful, they can reduce that down to 1 1/5 cups of food per day. But the problem is the question asks how many cups Leo is fed in a week. However, test writers know this. So if you look right over here at choice A, you have this very juicy 1 1/5 cups waiting to trap students. So it's the answer students get if they stop after calculating part one. So for the students who go on to part two, which is what the question asks for, and find out how many cups Leo is fed in a week, you take that 12/10 and you multiply it by 7, giving you 84/10, which reduces down to 8 2/5 cups of food per week, making the correct answer D. So you see that the two-part question is very tricky. Students really have to pay attention to what final measure they are looking for, and make sure that they're giving that final measure.
The fourth trap is questions with multiple answers. These are questions that ask students to pick more than one right answer. The test writers know that the kids are used to picking only one answer on the test, and a lot of them will pick only one answer for this question and then move on to the next. So, this entire question type is a trap. To avoid this trap, teach your students to circle the number of answers they should choose in the question. For example, if the question says, pick all the answers that apply, circle that sentence, then double check against the number of answers they picked once they finish the question. Whew, can't talk today. The last trap is vocabulary questions. Test writers often put synonyms of the tested word that don't fit the context in the first answer choices. So this trap catches kids who only look for another meaning of the word without considering the context. To avoid this trap, teach your students the substitution method. First, you replace the word in the sentence with a word or phrase that fits the context. Then the students look for an answer choice that means the same as the word or phrase they substituted. This works 90 to 95% of the time minimum to get the right answer. Let me show you an example.
Okay, so let's get into our example of the best way to approach a vocabulary question. So here you have the question. Most of the people at the banquet were not used to eating fine chocolate. And the word that is being defined is fine in this context. If you look at the answer choices, you will see faint, thin, great, rare. All of those could be synonyms of fine. It depends on the context. So students who are just looking for a very easy answer might pick faint or thin as the answer. But the best way to approach this question is by using the substitution method. And in that method, you would replace the word fine with another word or phrase. In this case, let's do used to eating high quality chocolate. Now, come down to your answer choices and look for a word that means high quality. And the only word that means high quality is great. So the correct answer is C. That's how you do the substitution method, and it works. I mean, we're talking 90 to 95% of the time, sometimes maybe 98% of the time. It is a fantastic tool to overcome distractors in vocabulary words.
These techniques work because they empower students to take control of their test taking experience. We arm them with knowledge and strategies, and by doing so, we transform their fear into confidence, their hesitation into action. So, fellow educators, let's empower our students. Let me know in the comments how well these techniques work for your class.